Growing research shows a correlation between uterine cancer and hair straightening products is raising concerns. Western Mass News reporter Libby James getting answers from a Bay State doctor on what the latest study has found.
We do know that endometrial cancer is multifactorial. We cannot say 100% that this alone explains the incidence of uterine cancer, but it's something that we should think about.
A recent study done by the U.S. National Institutes of Health has found a potential link between chemical hair straighteners and relaxers and a higher risk of endometrial or uterine cancer. Western Mass News spoke with the chief of gynecology at Bay State Medical Center, Dr. Tashana Myers, to find out more about the research.
It was a epidemiologic study looking at women who were enrolled on the sister study. So essentially, you had to be a woman who had one sister with breast cancer.
As part of the study, 34,000 women were tracked for 10 years as they used a wide range of hair products. The brands were not disclosed. Among the findings, women who had never used hair straightening products had a 1.6% risk of uterine cancer, but any sort of exposure moved the risk up to 4%. Dr. Myers tells us the harmful chemicals used in the hair straightening products include bisphenol A, formaldehyde, and phthalate. She says the other issue is these products are applied directly to the scalp.
And we understand that the scalp is a more absorptive surface, so that you will get higher concentrations of these products when they're applied to the scalp.
Her advice for women is to decrease their exposure to these chemicals and reconsider using the products on young children. Reporting for Western Mass News, I'm Libby James.